Hello! Today we are going to have a really special episode, the episode number 10, that we went to Padova University to talk with Mattia Cecchinato and Matteo Legnardi about the new findings in IBDV. Enjoy! So, hello, Poultry friends. I'm really happy today to visit Padova University in Italy to receive and turn in with experts, Mattia Cecchinato.
Hello, everyone.
And Matteo Legnardi.
Hello, everyone.
And we are going to discuss a little bit about Gumboro Disease, how to monitor it, and of course, the studies and the results they are having here in the university, doing a lot of analysis on Ursa samples to understand better, of course, the challenge we have around the world. So, again, welcome to talk with us in Turn In with Experts. I'm really glad to receive both of you today in our conversation. To start our conversation, Mattia, I would like to ask you to tell us a little bit your point of view about the current situation of Gumboro challenge around the world.
So for sure, infectious bursal disease is one of the most impactful disease of poultry, and it represents a problem for all sector and production system around the world. Anyway, it may be a lot of difference due to the heterogeneity among IBDV strain, with some strain that are limited to one region or one area. And for this reason, I think it's really important to have a good understanding of the epidemiology of IBDV in order to control better the disease.
Okay. And we are here today in the lab when all the magic happens to discover the samples or to discover the strains that are inside, what is really going on in the field. And I know that you receive samples, IBD samples from different parts of the world. Can you tell us a little bit what's the work you do here, how you proceed with the samples?
Yes, you are right, Marco. We receive samples from several parts of the world, in particular in Europe, but more recently we receive also samples from some countries in Africa and in Asia. And in our lab, we are able to perform several molecular assays with the aim to detect IBDV, but also to characterize the strain that we detected. And so in our diagnostic routine, the first things that we do is RT-PCR targeting the VP2. That is one of the important parts of the virus, of the genome, because it's one of the main determinants of pathogenicity and also antigenicity. But also a lot of studies were performed on this region of the genome, and so there are available a lot of sequence of this part of the virus, and so we can make a good comparison between the strain that we found and the one that are circulating and published by other groups. But furthermore, we also start to sequence the VP1 of the field virus, because VP1 and VP2 are two different parts of genome in two segments of the genome. And so having these two sequences, we can have a look at the possible reassortant event and so characterize better the strain. Okay. Also, in our lab, we validate some specific RT-PCR or real-time PCR for some specific strain, like the vaccine. And so these kind of tests are really useful to evaluate the vaccine coverage and the vaccine intake.
Okay. Can you disclose a little bit to us what's the results of this work that you are doing, what you are detecting?
As I told you, we receive mainly the sample from Europe, and looking at this data, it seems that the infectious pressure of IBDV is increasing compared to what we observed in the decade ago. But just to give you some number, we have the 25% of the sample that we receive that were characterized as a field strain.
Okay, you said that you are receiving most of the samples from Europe, but you have from different parts of the world as well. Can we see difference between countries, between zones?
Yes, of course, we observe differences, but also similarity in some part of the Europe, for example, where we detected the Eriasortan strain in the northern and western part. And this Eriasortan strain has a very virulent VP2 and a classical like VP1. And it seems to cause a subclinical infection. And looking at the phylogenetic analysis and phylodynamic analysis, it seems that it was originated recently. And this strain is present in several countries in Europe, like UK, Denmark, Germany, France, and many others. But it not spread to Italy, where we detected a different strain with a very virulent VP2 and a classical like VP1. And this strain seems to be correlated with viruses detected in Russia and in the Middle East. And so we are just speaking about Europe, so you can imagine looking at the epidemiology of different continents, the differences get bigger and bigger. And this, of course, pose some challenges in IBDV diagnosis and control.
Mattia said to us and mentioned to us about the variant from Portugal. Matteo, I know that the group just published a paper regarding that, about this new variant that was isolated in Portugal. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Okay. This research actually originated from our diagnostic activity. Since at the end of 2020, we started receiving some samples, some bursal samples from Portugal, specifically central and northern Portugal in broiler farms. And in some of them, we detected some typical strains whose BP2 sequence was different from any other known sequence. So, to be able to give more precise information to the field vets that requested this analysis, we decided to further characterize these strains by sequencing portions of both VP2 and VP1 based on the currently available classification systems. And based on our phylogenetic analysis, these strains indeed form a new genotype of IBDV with unique VP2 features, while the VP1 has classical-like features. This is the first time this genotype is properly described, but from the literature there are some hints that similar strains were detected at least twice between 2009 in Catalonia and 2013 in Portugal. So it seems that this lineage, this genotype is circulating in the Iberian Peninsula for at least a decade.
So Matteo, it's clear that the most common form of Gumboro disease nowadays in the field is the subclinical one. Can you see correlation with what we found in the lab, in your research, and what we see in the field?
That's a very relevant question, in my opinion. And it should be clear that molecular assays are not enough to properly assess the pathogenicity of a given strain. A strain should be also isolated, and pathogenicity tests must be run in vivo, which can be lengthy and laborious. Actually, we are in the process of doing so for the Portuguese genotype, so we hope we will have some information on this important issue soon. But what can we say for now is that despite detecting a lot of field strains in our diagnostic activities, it's very rare for field vets to report any kind of clinical signs that might be related to IB. So for sure vaccination is playing a part in preventing overt outbreaks of IBD, but I agree with you that probably the strains circulating nowadays, which are seeing the biggest evolutionary success in this moment, are strains which are associated mostly to subclinical infections. And this certainly is the case of the reassortant strains that are the dominant strains in northwestern Europe, for which pathogenicity tests were already performed, confirming that they are indeed mostly associated to subclinical infections, despite being still able to cause immunosuppression.
Okay, so I think it's really valuable information that when we detect something that can create some subclinical infection, that's not so clear for the vets, and helping them in the proper diagnosis. That drives us to a second topic that I would like to discuss with you. So if we want to run a monitoring, to have a proper diagnosis, to really understand the disease, how should we conduct it, in your point of view?
Well, based on what we just said, with most field strains currently circulating being associated to subclinical infection rather than overt clinical outbreaks, I think that investigating IBDV presence only when IBD-related signs are observed is not enough, because obviously field strains may still be present, and even if it does not cause any sign, it may still cause immunosuppression, thus leading to vaccine failures, to secondary infections, and to worse productive performance, which may be difficult to link to an IBDV infection. So I think that monitoring should be performed on a routine basis and should have two different aims. One is to be sure that infectious pressure is not building up, and the other is to ensure that the birds are always protected against IBD. And with molecular assays in our lab, we are actually able to do both, because we are able to detect field strains whose presence obviously is not wanted, is not desirable, even if no signs are observed. But on the other hand, we are also able to detect the presence of vaccine strains, whose presence obviously is wanted based on the vaccine type and the administration schedule. In addition to that, serology is also helpful. In some cases, it allows to discriminate infections with field strains and the normal immunological response to vaccination. And in general, it allows us to ensure that vaccination is done properly and birds are responding properly.
Mattia, associating these studies that you are conducting here and all this monitoring with different samples from different parts, and of course, with your experience, after we have the proper diagnosis, how we should control it, how we should control the challenge in the field.
So for sure, it's important the good management and the implementation of biosecurity measure. But the problem is that IBDV is highly contagious and extremely resistant to the environment. So it's very difficult to maintain out of the farm this virus, and once it enters, to eliminate it. So I think that the use of vaccine is the most effective way to control the IBDV infection, and not just only the vaccine. So it's very important to implement a good vaccination program, taking into account the vaccine type. We know that on the market there are different kinds of vaccine with different level of safety and efficacy. So it's really important the choice of the vaccine, but also the vaccine administration, both at the hatchery and in the field. So it's really important to have a high coverage of the birds.
And to close our really nice conversation today, I would like to ask for both of you, if we need to advise a vet in the field regarding Gumboro control, what would be your advice?
So in my point of view is to not underestimate this disease, because as Matteo said before, you cannot observe clinical signs, and so it's really important to make a routine monitoring activity in order to evaluate if in the field are circulating a virus, and if it's present, it's really important to evaluate the zootechnical performances in order to understand if this virus, first of all, is able to cause some problem to your flock, and secondary, as an indirect way to understand if the vaccination is efficacious or not. And of course, finally, I think that the use of routine vaccination is the only way to prevent and control IBDV.
So I would like to thank you for receiving me in your lab here in Padova University, and to have this really nice conversation, and of course adding a lot of content to our audience so that people understand not just what you do here in diagnosis and receiving samples from different parts of the world, publications, adding scientific basis for the Gumboro control, but as well sharing your expertise and knowledge.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you to have you here.
Okay, so thank you to watch us in this new episode. It was really a special episode for us, and keep in touch. Bye. Thank you for watching this episode, and do not hesitate to give us your feedback by commenting down below in the comment section. Goodbye, stay safe.